we thought it necessary to have a series of webinars in light of COVID and in light of where we would want to see the ecosystem move going forward. And the first webinar was by one of our own, Sam Kishuru, and a lot of key issues were coming up in that webinar. And some of the key questions I picked in that webinar were questions like, what value are accelerators and innovation hubs really providing to the entrepreneurs? Are the hubs and consultants really innovating enough? And we thought it necessary to bring in someone perhaps who wears both an entrepreneurial lens, the future of ecosystems. And today we have Roble. I keep getting his name, the spelling wrong, but I think it's Roble. Roble is first of all also an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur. He is also an author. He's authored a very interesting book called Silicon Valley, really trying to challenge the nuances of entrepreneur support or startup support. And today it's such an honor to have you join us and join the ASSEK community. The ASSEK community is really based off enablers and support and incubation hubs and the people who drive the ecosystem in terms of innovation, that is the Kenyan ecosystem and beyond. And so it's such a pleasure to have you because I don't want to take so much of your time, and we're already 6 minutes into the time. I will let you take it up from there, Robbie.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's staying safe. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to the members of ASSEK. We're living in extraordinary times, and entrepreneurs are going to play a critical role in helping society adapt to this new reality. And as such, your role as facilitators of innovation is going to be even more important. So I hope you get an opportunity and you gain from this presentation. I'm gonna, as Linda said, I'm gonna speak from an entrepreneurial perspective, but also from a perspective of part of the people who are bringing on this, I would say, the counterculture of Silicon Valley. I was very much building a company in the US. I raised over $1 million. We ran my startup for 6 years, but I really built it out of the Silicon Valley tent, partly because I was part of the underrepresented group that had a hard time raising venture capital funding and everything. And hopefully in this presentation, I will be able to also show some elements of the new Silicon Valley counterculture would actually be beneficial to adapt in this post-COVID-19 world. So I'm going to cover three main areas here: economic impact of the COVID-19, evolution of the entrepreneurial mindset, and then evolution of the accelerator model. So from an economic perspective, what does this really mean? If you just take an example now of a lockdown, what happens is there is a reduction in consumer demand. People are locked in, they're spending less. This, if you look at the economy and the parts of the economy as gears, this reduction in consumer demand has an impact on businesses. Now, businesses are seeing a reduction in business, and so they are also reducing employees and laying off employees. And suddenly now the consumer and group also now has lower spending power. And so it becomes a really vicious spiral down to the bottom. As consumer and demand decreases, businesses continue to get hit hard, and ultimately government is taking less in taxes because there is less economic activity. And so what the government does is it goes and borrows money from the market by selling treasury bills. What that does in turn it increases the borrowing rate for businesses. And so it's definitely a very dangerous spiral, and that's why a lot of governments during recession try and prop up the consumer part of the economy. Like for the US now, they've given everybody $1,200 just to make sure there's not a collapse in consumer demand, which will have difficult to recover from that. So we're now moving on to the next section, evolution of the entrepreneurial mindset. We'll be looking at the traditional startup path, lessons from the emerging Silicon Valley counterculture, and ideas for a post-pandemic world. Okay, next slide. So here is where, and Brenda, there are 3 points here, but I'll tell you when to click. Here is where I have my first question, and I'll be asking 2 questions in this webinar. The people who answer right will get the answer as close to as possible. The first one that does it will be getting a free book. I'll be giving out two copies of my book. So if you know the answer to the question, I think just include it in the messaging, and I think Brenda will track it. So the first one it's kind of like there isn't a right answer, but if you can get close to it as possible, that's good. So in terms of identity, when you ask who are you, a lot of people relate and their identity to what they do, what their job, their careers, or their family. So so the first, Brenda, can you click? So the first one is, I'll take you guys back to Sunday school when Moses on the burning bush asked God. God tells Moses, go tell the people I sent you. And Moses is a bit confused. He's trying to say, hey, but who should I say sent me? But then, God is omnipresent, all-knowing. It's hard to define God. And God says, I am who I am. Because, it's beyond our imagination what God is. So this is one of the first kind of identity type answers. Brenda, click again, please. So the next one, we get back to Africa. So Ubuntu philosophy, when somebody asks, who are you? They say, I am because we are. And this is really a reflection of African culture. A lot of us are very linked to our culture, our tribes, because that's where we gain our values, our identities, our looks. So we are because we derive our identity from our culture, which is a beautiful thing in many aspects. Compared maybe to the Western world, which is more individualistic. But then also it has some negative aspects if you look at politics and when tribes go against each other. But generally, it's a beautiful concept. I am because we are. The question I have, and I will give the answer at a later slide, is what would the answer be from a techpreneur? I am because, if you ask a techpreneur what he is, I am because of what? And I would give you a clue. It's really a thing that occurs. It's a milestone in an entrepreneur's journey. There is a place where he gets something. So I am because I something. And we'll get back to it. You guys can guess and maybe message what would identify an entrepreneur or distinguish one entrepreneur from the other. Brenda, let's move to the next slide. You gave it up. Anyway, yeah, let's just move on. I think I sent you the wrong copy, but just click on that. I am because I got funded. So, and a lot of the times, entrepreneurs spend so much time raising money, and there's always a clear distinction between a venture funded startup and a non-venture funded startup. And so a lot of this, and Silicon Valley counterculture is challenging this and concept of and entrepreneurs feeling and like obligated or they need to meet this milestone of getting funded, because there's so many other ways of building a company without actually securing venture capital funding, which is really designed for very small number of startups. The other big thing that the Silicon Valley counterculture is challenging is, what is your goal? What is your idea of success? Do you have to be a billion dollar company, or do you have to be a completely dominant company in a specific industry? And so this is where the concept of the Silicon Valley kind of aspirational symbol is a unicorn. The Silicon Valley counterculture is proposing a new aspirational symbol, which is a zebra, and that is a company which is sustainable, can coexist with other companies within an industry, provides value to its employees and its customers and a great return, and it's diverse, and so it doesn't really have to be the dominant company in that industry. So we're now moving to the evolution of the accelerator model. We look at the traditional accelerator model, emerging accelerator models, and then we'll be looking at elements of a bootstrapping program, which you guys can consider, or some of you might have already implemented in your programs, and also just to kind of consider elements of an organic growth model. This is a model that is really dependent on internally generated revenue and maybe traditional financing. And Brenda, let's click the next slide. So the new type of model and an interesting accelerator program that has started here in the US. There are quite a few that are coming out all over the world, but one which I found quite interesting is one which is called Tiny Seed, and they define themselves as the first startup accelerator designed for software as a service bootstrappers. So so one of the so for them, they have a startup selection, and yep, there we go. So they have a startup selection, they have a program, and then they have graduation. So the type of companies they look for are SaaS startups. So the advantage with software as a service, a lot of it is subscription fees. So it's like reliable revenue that is coming. The startups have to have a clear path to profitability because they have to be sustainable after coming out of the program. Low capitalization, because a lot of the times the investments is around $150,000. Has to have a high profit margin. Does not need to be a unicorn destined company, and companies that don't need to aspire to grow at all cost. Next button. And so they receive a small investment. The program sets a salary cap on the funders. There's mentorship, and it's for a longer period, and for over a year, and it's done remotely. So you don't have to go to a certain place to do it. So it's done remotely. And what some of the successful metrics are, the startup has to be profitable, it has to build traction. How the accelerator gets a return is through dividends. And so because of the salary cap, anytime the entrepreneur wants to pull out money, they have to pay themselves dividends beyond the salary. And so when they pay dividends, they also pay dividends to the accelerator. And also exit opportunities includes second round of investments, or if the company gets sold. And click one more time, Brenda. And so other models is revenue-based financing. So this is accelerator and VCs investing and pulling out a certain percentage of gross revenue until they get paid. And some accelerators also set a minimum return like 3x or 4x, and the company has a period of time to pay that. Once it's paid, the company is independent to grow successfully.
Oh, thank you, Roblet. Brenda here. I think that was a good presentation. I think, if does any of the attendees have any questions, any comments? I've got guys texting me on WhatsApp saying if we'll be sharing the slides. Yes, we'll be sharing the slides. yes, this is being recorded and we'll share the recording. I personally really enjoyed the webinar. It was quite informative. I would be delighted to hear what the rest of you think, and if you have any questions for Robley, any comments on the webinar. Thank you, Eunice. Nyandat, she says, this was brilliant. Anthony Kiogora says, very informative. Ade Dana, thank you, Robley, for your time. Linda Kwamboka, let us have more on this. This was good. Most definitely, Linda will have more on this. I think it was very, very exciting. George Rain, quite an informative session. Frida, fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I think it was quite fantastic presentation. Left me with a lot to ponder on. Wilfred Njagi says, Sheila says it was great. Thank you for hosting this session. So I think it was quite insightful, very different from a lot of the webinars that you've had. It was very Esther says there is a lot to think about here, especially as it comes to serving the African market. That is very true. One question, what is the one thing you think accelerators across the continent should do to retool their work to support entrepreneurs through COVID-19? So what is the one thing you think accelerators across the continent should do to retool their work to support entrepreneurs through COVID-19?
I think COVID-19, I would say there's a period during the pandemic and there's a period beyond the pandemic. I think the period during the pandemic is going to be a shorter time, even though it seems forever. It's going to be a shorter time. I think in that place, it's really about capital preservation and also trying to adapt to the new environment and finding ways to continue to engage with your customers in a helpful way, and it doesn't seem exploitative at the same time. And how to continue to be relevant in this period. So that is a short term. The long term is really gonna be, are you able to ride the new wave? What is the new wave? What is the changing dynamics in your specific industry, and are you positioned to ride that wave?
All right. Are you positioned to ride that wave? Very, very, very true.